Good morning. So one more time on collision and multiple object tracking. One more time on collision and multiple object tracking, and then we'll move into Russell on knowledge by description and knowledge by acquaintance. I should say next week there's a lecture only on Monday. There is no lecture on Wednesday or Friday, and then we pick up again the following week. Okay, so we're nearly home. I hope you're not too disappointed. Yeah. There won't be office hours on Wednesday, I'm afraid. I'll be away. Yeah. Okay, well, I hope you will manage somehow. But if anyone needs to speak to me before I go away, then write today and we can fix the time for Monday. Okay? Okay, so I want to connect back what we're doing now to some much earlier discussions about twin Earth and look at how that relates to the Wittgenstein, and then the key point that I was trying to bring out last time, that it seems like reference requires awareness. And then at the end, I'll begin on trying to show how you can really make progress with these questions that haunted Frege by looking at some of what's going on in cognitive science. So I'll start on that at the end today, and then we'll pick up on that next week and the following week. Remember our old friend Twin Earth? Is Twin Earth very much like Earth? Yes, Twin Earth is very much like Earth, except for the XYZ. And the moral of that story was that you can factor understanding a sign into two components. The bit inside the head that doesn't of itself constitute understanding or meaning, and then there's the causal or contextual relation to your environment. So the idea was analyze meaning in terms of two elements. And there is always this puzzle about the second element, the causal or contextual element. Is that causal or contextual element something inside the mind? Is that something that's an aspect of your mind? What's your hunch? Put up your hand if you think, yeah, that causal or contextual element is inside your mind. Here's a question: is the causal or contextual factor something that's inside your mind? Put up your hand if you think the answer is yes. And if you think the answer is no, and if you have no idea what I'm talking about, would you like to elaborate?
There seems to be a series, a chain of
That's right.
from the photon in the object, photon into the eye, on to the brain.
That's right.
The whole causal system.
That's right. Would you think of the mind as the thing that's that's at the end of the causal chain? Yeah, the thing is, that's a natural way to think of it, and that seems to be how Putnam was thinking of it in that early article, those early articles. But what came out when we were talking about how you know about whether you're thinking and what you're thinking is that these causal or contextual factors are actually constitutive of you thinking the particular thoughts that you do. Yeah, so if you change the causal or contextual factors, you are changing which thoughts you're having. So that makes it seem like the causal or contextual factors just must be inside the mind, even if spatially they're kind of remote. So if you look at this in the context of Wittgenstein, what I was suggesting at the end when we were looking at Wittgenstein was that your knowledge of the truth condition of the sentence, your knowledge of what has to be so for the sentence to be true, is your knowledge of what you're about in using the sentence, is knowledge of your objective in using the sentence, what it is that you're trying to verify or to act on. And that was the argument for saying that there's something missing from Wittgenstein's conception of meaning and understanding. It isn't right to say there's only the use. We understand why we're using the words in the ways we do. We don't just use them, we have some insight into what we are doing when we use the words the ways we do. Now, if you thought there's only the use and knowledge of reference is just a kind of prod to you using the word in a particular way, then it would be hard to see what hangs on the question I was just raising. Is that causal or contextual factor inside the mind? But if you think that knowledge of reference is what's giving you your oversight of what you're doing, and that knowledge of reference is constituted by the causal chain, then it seems like that must be something internal to the mind, because it's only if it's something internal to the mind that could be constituting your insight into what you're about in using the sign the way you do. I'll try and make this much more concrete in just a second. So the idea here is we're going to acknowledge Wittgenstein's point that use is more fundamental than knowledge of truth conditions, so you can't get the inference rules for a sign from the truth table. You can't figure out how to use any word, successor or whatever, from knowledge of its truth conditions. Use is really the basic thing. But we keep a role for reference and truth conditions in making use intelligible. So your knowledge of truth conditions derived from your knowledge of reference, that's going to provide you with your insight, your knowledge of what you're about in using language. And then that's got to be something inside the mind. If you have some overview of what's going on, that can't be provided by some causal chains remote from your ken. They must be inside your mind. So what I want to try and fill out now is a picture in which your knowledge of the reference of a sign is something that you have in virtue of your awareness of the object. So if you just take the simplest case where I take the bag and I say, that bag, right? There is the sign, there is the bag. There is in virtue of my awareness of the thing that I have my knowledge of what I'm about. You all look like you're reserving judgment. Okay, let me try and fill this out with some examples. Remember Polition's thing about multiple object tracking, right? You get the 4 targets that start moving. The flash to show you your targets, then they start moving, then you've got to say, was that one of mine? And Polition's picture of the basis of visual reference is that you've got some gadget like this in your head. You've got 4 trackers for, you assign them to particular objects, and then you can interrogate to get more information about any one of the objects. Yeah? That's all familiar at this point. Yeah. And it's natural to think that this is a way of explaining what Russell meant by acquaintance. Acquaintance with an object then would be when this is your mind. Minds are always round, and objects for some reason are usually square or cylindrical. But I don't know why it's so, but it always has been so. So there's your mind. Here's the object, and the object causes this thing, something like this system, to swing into play. Yeah, that's what it is to be acquainted with the object. But there are 2 bits missing here. One is that that's got to be connected up to thinking that's in which you can engage in deductive reasoning, because it's only then that you have singular reference proper. Yeah. And the other thing I've just been saying is you need is consciousness of the object. There has to be awareness of the object. Polition's picture, Polition himself as a point of principle, when I first asked him about this view, said, it seems to me a good methodology never to talk about consciousness. But we're philosophers, right? We just love to talk about consciousness. We think we don't really understand what's going on unless somebody talks about consciousness at some point. Yeah. So I think in Polition's picture, consciousness is deliberately left out as kind of bad method, a bad notion for a scientist to be using. But it seems, I'll try and bring this out in a second, but it seems intuitively compelling that you don't have singular reference in the visual case unless you have consciousness of the object. And in principle, you could have Polition's kind of causal contact with the object, even if you didn't have any experience of it. So just to try and make this a little bit more concrete, we talked last time about blindsight. Blindsight cases are cases where a patient gets damage to one half of the visual cortex at the back of the head. Yeah. So they're blind in the left field. Let's suppose. They have no awareness of anything in the left field. And so you hold something in the left field and you say, is it upright or is it tilted? And they say, I don't know. I mean, I can't see a thing. And you say, go on, guess. And they guess, and they reliably get it right, to their own astonishment. Right? I mean, it's surprising that they get this right. So here is the situation. You've got, there is the patient, both distinguished by the looks of great intelligence. There is the patient, there is the experimenter, there is the screen carefully located in the blind field. The experimenter saying, there are stripes in your blind field, what kind are they? And of course the patient is saying, well, I've no idea, I mean, I can't see a thing there. And the experimenter says, go on, guess. Well, I guess they're horizontal and red. And astonishingly, that turns out to be right. Yeah. So suppose in general you've got this thing in the blind field and the patient can reliably make guesses about what it is. Does that patient understand reference to the thing? If the experimenter says that thing, is the patient in a position to interpret it? I say no. Even if the patient can reliably make correct guesses about the thing in the blind field. I mean, incidentally, this is, when you first encounter it, this is often seen as very, very puzzling, this phenomenon. Yeah, there's nothing really deeply puzzling about this going on. What happens at the back, I mean, this is a primitive bit of physiology, but what happens basically is that the visual stream goes from your eyes to the back of the head and then splits into two streams. One goes up to the top of the head and is how vision controls action. The other goes down to the bottom, and that's where you get the stream that sustains visual experience. Something like that. You know about this? That's roughly correct then. Yeah. Okay, keep me honest if this is not right. Okay. And roughly what's happening is that the stream going down to the bottom of the head that sustains visual awareness has been knocked out for that half of the visual field. It's not getting significant input. The stream that goes up to the top of the head that controls action is still functioning just the same way it regularly does, but this does not sustain visual awareness. So that's not a deeply puzzling situation, if you see what I mean. It's kind of unexpected. It does mean that if you give the patient a cup in their blind field and you say, pick it up, and the patient's saying, well, I can't see a thing, but they reach to pick it up, their hand will be shaped the right way to pick the thing up. Yeah, and that's really, it puzzles the patient, but deeply there is no difficulty about this. And it's a very interesting phenomenon. But I want to suggest to you, look, the right diagnosis here is the patient has got a kind of Wittgensteinian understanding of the term, that cup. The patient knows how to use the sign. The patient can verify things like, that cup has red stripes on it. The patient can act, if the doctor says, pick up that thing, the patient can do it. The patient has the use of the sign. The use of the sign embeds in the patient's form of life just fine. And I mean, this is real cases I'm talking about, but we can easily set up a thought experiment where the patient has very elaborate abilities to interact with the thing in the blind field without having any awareness of it. Yeah. So what does the patient get when they have awareness? At this point, I say, the patient can use the sign all right. The patient has all the inputs and outputs to use of the sign, but the patient doesn't know what the sign stands for. When the patient finally gets a look at the thing, when the patient finally experiences the object, then what they get is not necessarily any more of an ability to use the sign, they just suddenly know what it refers to. They can say, that is what I was reaching for. That is what the red striped thing was. They now have some insight into why they were using the sign the way they did. Yeah. So the use was there in advance of them having the experience of the object. That fits with the Wittgenstein's main negative point. But experience of the object did provide something valuable. It provided you with some glimmer as to what was going on all that time. That is a moment of revelation. Another way to look at it is, blindsight patients are extensively tested. Once somebody's reliably found to have blindsight and to be cooperative with experimenters, people will come from all over the world to test you. Right, so these these guys just had the daylights tested out of them. They will be in thousands and thousands of trials. So they know that they are reliable. Yeah, they're reliably making right guesses. But they are still always said to be only guessing in what they do. They say they're only guessing. We say they're only guessing. Experience is needed to have knowledge of what you're about, not just reliably correct use. So it's experience of the object that gives us knowledge of reference. Yeah, sensory awareness is required for knowledge of reference here. Here's one other kind of example. Suppose that as you're sitting here, your attention drifts. I know that this is a very remote possibility, but you can consider this as a kind of, one of these philosophers' thought experiments. So suppose your attention drifts, and you're looking around the room, and the person beside you says, "Look at that woman there." And you say, "I don't know who you mean." And you're looking at the room, and you just got a sea of faces. You don't know which one your neighbour means. And your neighbour says, "That one there." And you say, "Yeah, but which one?" And your neighbour says, "What do you think that is they're wearing?" And you say, "I have no idea. I don't know which one you mean." And your neighbour says, "Well, guess." And you guess right. Right? Your neighbour say, you say, "She's wearing a red jacket." And I don't think anybody, yes, you're wearing a red jacket. And your neighbour says, "That's right. She is." And your neighbour says, "What height?" And you guess correctly. Now that could happen. That'd be a little bit like the Blindsight case, right? You're just staring out. Somewhere in your field of vision, there is that person. And somehow that person's got causally hooked up to you giving the right responses. But do you know who your neighbour is talking about? No, you've got the use all right. You're making the inputs and outputs from the use of the sign all right. But I say, what you'd say in that situation is, "I have no idea which one you're talking about." When your gaze finally, sorry, it's natural to use examples here. When your gaze finally locks onto the right person, then you say, "Aha, now I know who you mean," even though your ability to use the sign may have been completely unchanged. Yeah. It's kind of what? It's exactly like trying to find Waldo. Yeah, trying to find Waldo is a case where you're trying to lock onto Waldo, but Waldo's there in your visual field, all right. Presumably you're experiencing Waldo in some sense, but you need something a bit more than that. You need to lock on. Yeah. So if you were reliably making guesses, looking at a page and reliably making guesses about what Waldo's wearing, even though you hadn't pinpointed him consciously, yeah, that would be exactly the same kind of case. And in that kind of case, you would say, but I can't see him. Yeah, I haven't picked him out. Yeah. Expert. Uh-huh. Yes, right. That's right. And I was going to show you some inattentional blindness things, but we need a bit more theory before it really makes sense what's going on there. So I want to do that on Monday. Okay, but you're right. Just being there in your visual field is not enough to have knowledge of it. Yeah, you've got to be attending to it. So I say in that kind of case where you're just looking at a sea of faces, you can't be said to know who you're referring to until you're conscious of that person. Yep. Yeah. I'm sorry, it's kind of hard. I did.
In the case of in the blindsight person with the television screen in front of him with the horizontal
Yeah.
slides, there's only one screen there. And so if I say, you look at the screen and tell me what kind of stripes are there,
Yeah.
and then the person guesses right, and then you say, because he still has the vision that's going to the upper cortex, or whatever, and that's how he
That's right.
guess right. That's a different case than when you ask me, look at that girl over there,
Yeah.
when there's a whole bunch of people in the screen. And so it's like, you kind of have to read my mind in a way that you don't have to in this case, because there's only one thing there.
That's true. There's no need for selective attention here, whereas the thing about the girl in the room is that there is a need for selective attention.
There was one girl in the room, then you should be able to correctly guess. Or
If there was only one girl in the room, yeah.
there's a way of, it's actually, I feel like it's not actually guessing though, they're actually,
If there's only one person in the room and you say, well, look at that girl, then sure, that's so easy, it's hardly a guess. Is that what you mean?
right.
Yeah. Okay, these two examples bring out, you're right, these two examples are different. They bring out slightly different things. This one is not really about selective attention. It's about the need for experience. Yeah?
Yeah, but it seems like by your explanation, if they actually are seeing it, it's just they don't have the visual awareness, but they have the visual for action.
That's right, that's right. They have vision for action with respect to this thing, yeah.
Then that seems like it is a kind of experience, which I think I definitely not.
Okay, that's a line people sometimes take, actually, that the patient is experiencing the thing, but they just don't know that they're experiencing it. Yeah? I guess there is... Okay, that is a line you could go down. All I would say at the moment is that I don't have a knockout against that, because it's very difficult to differentiate really experiencing something from being able to report that you're experiencing something. The patients seem to completely sincerely and across the board say, I can't experience, I don't have a thing there. You know, I'm not getting any experience of that. And they're usually taken at face value. But I agree, you could put in that skepticism there. Yeah. Okay, that's how I'm reading this case anyhow. Yeah. How you could read it as, what's missing is knowledge of your experience. That's what you're suggesting. Yeah. Okay. And in the sea of faces case, right, what's missing there is not experience, because the whole point is there the person is staring you in the face. You know, they're right there. It's just that you haven't managed to single out which one it is. That's right. It's like Where's Waldo? You know, when you're looking at the page with Waldo, and Waldo might be right in front of you. You know, Waldo might be right in front of your nose, as we say, but you still just don't see him. Yeah. So it's like that. The person might be right in front of me, staring me in the face, but I still just don't manage to select that one. So what I'm saying is, you need both aspects for reference. You need experience, and you need, within that experience of the thing, to have singled it out. And these two cases, you're right, make slightly different points. Yeah. Okay, but that's an important reservation you're expressing. Your reservation would mean we had to put it that knowledge of experience is what's required for reference. Yeah. If you accept my intuitions at all. Yeah. Yeah.
You know the operation, you recognize how to use it, but you don't actually know the operations that it afterwards. So you're not able to actually single out one
Yeah. It certainly does make sense. I have to say that one limitation of this approach is, so far as I can see, is that it doesn't work at all for the arithmetic case. Yeah, I just can't see any analog of these things. I mean, people do sometimes say, look, there's a world of numbers out there, and you have some kind of extrasensory intuition of the world of numbers. Yeah, that's how you can go beyond the incompleteness of arithmetic and recognize for yourself truths that can't be proved in a particular formal system. But that's kind of crazy, that stuff. It's the idea of extrasensory intuition of a frozen mathematical realm. The trouble is, if that's not right, and I don't see how it can be right, it's very puzzling to know what to make of our understanding of the numbers, because I think that is the natural model. Yeah. That's where philosophy of mathematics begins, really. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just kind of thinking of an example where we are thinking or we know how to state an idea or some concept that we don't have to have a way to specify. But
Yeah.
we don't know how to latch on to that
Yeah.
particular or know the operation of that idea.
Yeah. I promise you the purely visual case is hard enough. The just getting it, how I can refer to this thing is hard enough. But there are two reasons for focusing on it. One is it seems to be the basis of all our other abilities to refer. And the other is that we always have it in mind as our model when we're thinking about other areas. So even when you think of arithmetic, is not the natural model to have is the visual one. You think, well, it's as if I could survey all the numbers in a single glance. It's the model that stays with us. So it's important to understand how this works. Now, I think this business of selective attention and vision, homing in on just the right thing and using that to control your talk, I'm suggesting that's the right way to think about the basic cases of reference. But I think Pollution's way of doing it can't be right. So here are some reasons why it seems like it can't be right. Remember Pollution's multiple object tracking? Suppose that the four balls that are yours are labeled 1 to 4 at the start of the thing. Yep. So I don't actually. If I was really good, I would have the actual den with them labeled 1 to 4. But suppose they're labeled 1 to 4 at the start, and then at the end, and then during the course of the trial, the figures 1 to 4 vanish, and at the end 1 flashes, and you're asked not just was that one of yours, but did that have the 2 on it? Will you be able to do that? I mean, this is just to refresh your memory. So they're labeled 1 to 4. You keep tabs on them. Was this one of yours? Did it have the 2 on it? Okay. Well, you're more insightful than the norm. People usually can't do that. Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit hard to. This isn't really a scientific test, because there weren't actually any numbers on them, and you had to pretend. But
all you're doing is counting them over.
yeah, right. Okay. I promise you, the finding is, in general, people can't do it. Right. So what that suggests is that in multiple object tracking, you're actually keeping track of the 4 objects as a single block. It's not that you're referring to each of them and keeping track of each one individually. You're keeping track of the cohort, not each single one. Another reason it doesn't seem like singular reference is that people don't really show any awareness of the features of the targets while they're tracking. If you change the colors of the targets as they're moving around, people can keep track of them just fine, and they won't even notice the changes in the colors or the changes in the shape. There are cases where you change it from. I told you, I think, that you change it from being a hen to being a squirrel, and people just don't notice that kind of stuff. They keep track of it just fine. But surely singular reference, if you're going to really pick out something for singular reference, that really requires that you be aware of it as having many properties. And also, as I began by saying, Pollution's picture, this kind of object tracking doesn't fundamentally require consciousness. The basic argument for saying you need attention for object perception is that to experience something as an object, you've got to be aware of it as having many properties. Right? That seems to be basic to the idea of what an object is. It's a locus for many properties. Yeah? And there's a classic set of tests, actually by Untitled, who was here at Berkeley for such a long time, saying that to be aware of something as having many properties, you must attend to it. So the classic kind of task was, look at this scene. Is there a red one here? You can do that in a moment, right? That was easy. That didn't tax you. Nobody was looking taxed, right? Okay, you got the red one, right? It just, as they say, it just kind of pops out at you, the red one. Okay. Look, what about this one? Is there a red one with a bar through it? Okay, is that easier or harder? Harder, yeah. And the argument here is that to get a single feature, you just scan for that feature. To get a conjunction of features, to get red and bar, you have to scan through the whole lot. Yeah, you have to serially attend one by one to the whole thing. Scanning for a single feature is simultaneous. It just pops out. Scanning for a conjunction of features is more laborious. And there are, I guess there must be thousands of studies by now of this kind of task. And it's basically a very robust phenomenon. And Treisman's original idea was, what goes on in vision is that there are all these different processing streams. So there's a bit of your brain that is doing the color, a bit of your brain that is doing the orientation, a bit of your brain that is doing the shape. Yeah? So there is specialization in color processing. These attributes are processed independently of one another. The picture has got a lot more complex since Treisman's original theory, but there is still something to that these capacities can be knocked out one by one. For example, you can have someone who gets central color blindness or an inability to detect orientation or difficulty with shape, pretty much independently of their ability to do the other things. There's specialization. So if there's specialization, then you've also got what Treisman called the binding problem. You've got the problem of you break up the stimulus into lots of different aspects to process it in vision, and then you've got the problem of putting it together. How do you know that redness goes with square rather than roundness? You see what I mean? I mean, I take it, we all take it for granted right now that there is specialization in vision. You hear so much about it, right? But if there is specialization, there must also be integration, presumably. So when you're asked, is there a red one? Then you just need to scan the color processing bit and see, is there something red there? Yeah. And Treisman's idea was, what you get in each processing stream is the feature and you get its location. So if you're asked, is there a red one? You just scan your color maps and say, oh yeah, there's a red one, and I know where it is, because it tells you on the color map where it is. But if you're asked, is there a red one with a bar? You've got to look through your color map, and you've got to look through your bar map. And you've got to say, is there a bar at the same place as that color? Yeah? So putting it together is a much more difficult matter, a much slower matter of putting together different features that are at the same location. Just another quick classic thing. You've got to find the horizontal green bar. Right? Here are two tasks to do. So which one is more difficult? Find the horizontal green bar. I know it's early, but that wasn't too bad, right? Is it okay? Yeah, yeah. Okay, find the horizontal green bar. That's a little bit harder. Yep. Not much harder. Yep. Find the horizontal green bar. Harder? Okay, so there you see the effect that you're in this one. You're really just searching for a single feature, horizontality. Yeah, because the distractors, the color thing doesn't really come into it. But here you're really having to put together horizontality and green. Yeah, and so you're having to do a scan. and you've got more distractors to scan through here than you have here. So it should take you longer to do this one than to do this one. Yep.
It's like it takes one extra step. Instead of just like finding like the horizontal line, you go like first find like ones that red at horizontal and like just cross it out and then put the horizontal line. Then you take a step.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. And that step is attention. Right? That's the name for it when you bind these different things together. Another one like that. Suppose you focus on the top left-hand cross. Yeah? The top left-hand cross. And I ask you, don't move your eye. Is there an X on the screen with the left, the one that goes from top left to bottom right, purple? It's really difficult, right? You can tell, just if you've got your attention focused up there, you can tell that in your field of vision, there are a lot of stuff there with purple and green bars on it, X's and pluses. But you can't really get determinacy on what conjunctions of features you have until you relax your attention and start to scan through the scene. Yeah. Okay, so here are some much more recent demonstrations that I think are just the coolest demonstrations of the idea that getting single features from a scene is easy. It's fast, automatic, parallel. Putting together different conjunctions of features, which is what you really need for object perception, for reference, is hard. So we might need to put down the shades for this, but let's try it. Here are, at the top one here, you'll see movement and color. And the question is the movement synchronized with the color? And if so, how? And for the bottom one here, you get the same question. You get movement and color. And the question is the movement synchronized with the color? Yep. So actually, let me break that down a little bit. Let me just ask the question for the top one. Is there movement and is there color? Is there movement and is there color? And then for both the third question, is the movement synchronized with the color? And if so, how? Is it? Lost it. Sorry? But the bottom one is not? Okay. Any other comments? So I make it that light is going left and black is going right in the top one. Yeah. So I can put together the lightness with the leftness and the blackness with the rightness. Yeah, I put together two different properties there. The bottom one, what do you think about the bottom one? Well, let me put it another way. Is there blackness and whiteness in the bottom one? Is there leftness and rightness in the bottom one? Okay, that's easy, right? But are they in sync or not? No, or you can't tell or something like that. Yeah, they actually are in sync, but you can't tell. Right? You can't get it that they're in sync. So what that means is that, this is from an article by Alex Holcomb called Seeing Fast and Slow, that the stuff you see fast, right, you get it very fast, whether there's black and white, whether there's movement, that comes very fast. Putting together the blackness or whiteness and the movement, that's slow. Some more central process has to lumber into action. And it takes it a while. Sticking features together is hard. Here are some other examples of the same model. I don't know, I just think these are fantastic. Okay, so your question is, are the bars, so you got one on the left and one on the right, one on the left, one on the right, one on the left, are the bars pointing the same way? on the left and the right, or are they pointing in different directions, right? So, okay, so you can answer the question. It's easy for the top one, right? I find it impossible for the middle one. Yeah, are they going the same way, pointing the same way, or a different way? Okay, you do it, right? The general thing is, you can see at a glance that they're moving. Yeah, that's easy. Yeah, that they're changing orientation. Change of orientation is happening all the way along here, but it's very hard to see whether it's same or different. Yeah. So again, there's something you get very fast and something you get slow. Something that requires attention. Yeah. And maybe one last thing. This is the hardest one to get, but this is again about putting together different features. Sorry? Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I should have had a health warning. You know, this may induce seizures. Yeah. God. Eek. Okay, so this is about direction of movement and color. Yeah. So you're going to see green and red, and you're going to see two kinds of movement. What's that? Clockwise movement and counterclockwise movement. Yeah. And one possibility is that the green goes together with the clockwise movement, and the red goes together with the counterclockwise movement. Yeah. Or is it round the other way, that the red goes with the counterclockwise movement, and the green goes with the clockwise movement? Okay. This is your task. I think maybe the light's not good enough. Let's just put these down. You may never see these again, so. Thanks, that really helps. Can you do that? Anyone? Louder. Green is clockwise. On Wittgensteinian grounds, you must be wrong. That's how I make it. It's tough, but it seems to me like the green is going that way, and the red is going that way. That's a really interesting question, and I just don't know. Yeah. That is a really great question. I just have no idea. You'd really need to do it to see, to be sure. Okay, but you can do it there. It's difficult, but you can do it, right? I don't think so, but it's an interesting theory. It might be worth running with. Okay, what about this one? Okay, let me ask you first. Is there red in the picture? Is there green in the picture? Is there directionality in the picture? I mean, is there some kind of swirling? Yeah. So, okay, the general picture is again meant to be the same, that getting red and green and getting whether there's swirl or not That's easy. You can do that very fast. You can get that here. Yeah. But to put them together, to put the red together with a direction and the green together with a different direction is slower and requires more time. You've got time here. You don't get time here to do it. Your visual system isn't getting time. I see what you mean. I do find this one difficult. I never know quite what I'm looking at with this one. Okay, so the general point is, the general bombshell here is awareness of a single object as having many properties depends on attention to it. Putting together different properties as properties of a single object depends on attending to that object. A reference to an object is being able to put together many different properties is all true of that thing. When we have those inferences, like A is F, A is G, so A is both F and G, that's really the core of singular reference. And what lets you do that is visual attention in the visual case. Do you see what I'm saying? Okay. So what we need to do to understand the phenomena of Phrygian sense, for example, in the visual case, is to look at the way visual attention works. So the reading for Monday is Russell's knowledge by acquaintance and knowledge by description, but we'll also go back and revisit where we came in the whole course, Frege on sense and reference. And that's somewhat disturbing. No, let's pack it up. Thank you, guys.